Hello and welcome back to another episode of Chat with Brandy, a weekly show where we talk personal and business finance, taxes, and how to make money while doing what you love. I'm your host, bookkeeper, and tax preparer Brandy Miron, and this is episode 17. This week, as you can see behind me, was my birthday week, which got me thinking about obviously, being grateful to be alive, but also aging and everything that comes with, like retirement and saving money. And it also happens to be RRSP season right now. So let's talk about registered retirement savings plans and tax-free savings plans today. So a couple acronyms that you might hear are RRSPs and TFSA. So an RRSP is a registered retirement savings plan, okay? So the registered part of it implies that it is controlled by the government, meaning that there are specific rules in place for this type of account. If you have an RRSP with a bank, for example, they are required by law to report any contributions that you make to that account to the government, okay? So the benefit of an RRSP, and the whole idea behind an RRSP is that you're saving for retirement. So what it does is it gives taxpayers the benefit of getting a tax deduction in the year that you make the contribution. So for every dollar that you put into an RRSP, that lowers your taxable income by $1, okay? So it gives you 100% tax savings on the funds you put in, okay? The RRSP year is from typically March 1st to February 28th, okay? And the reason that they do that is because the tax year is January to December. So what they want to do is give taxpayers the chance to look at, okay, what was my income for January to December? And can I offset some of that income by making an RRSP contribution between January and February of the following year? Okay, so that's what I mean when I say we're in RRSP season right now, because it is between January and February, and you would now have the ability to look back on your 2018 income and determine if it would be a good idea for you to put an RRSP contribution in. So like I said, it's usually from March 1st to February 28th. It can change based on if February 28th falls on a weekend or there's a leap year involved. This year, the deadline to put an RRSP contribution in for the year 2018 is March 1st, 2019. You can choose, so an RRSP is not just a savings account. You can choose from different investments to go in that are within that RRSP plan, okay? So you can have stocks, bonds, mutual funds, index funds, exchange-traded funds, shares, even gold and silver within an RRSP. Any investment income that you make within the RRSP, so for example, if you make interest or capital gains, that is not taxable while it is in the RRSP, okay? Some of you also may get the opportunity to contribute and even be matched by your employer to an RRSP. So this usually means the employer will deduct the contribution directly off your paycheck, so you never even get the chance to see it at all, which is nice. And then they put it into your RRSP account, and then if you're really lucky, they'll even match that contribution for you. So if you have that chance, take it, because that's free money for you. Okay, how much can you contribute to an RRSP? The amount the CRA lets you put in is based on previous year's income. So right now, that means 18% of your last year's income. So obviously right now we're recording this in January 2019. So that would be looking at 18% of your 2017 income would be your contribution limit for 2018, or $26,000, whichever is less, okay? Now, if you don't put the entire 18% or $26,000 in this year, your unused contribution room would get carried forward. That's why a lot of you watching right now probably have a way higher contribution limit than 18% of your 2017 income, okay? Now, if you don't know what your contribution limit is, you can look on your 2017 tax return or notice of assessment, or if you have an online CRA account, you can check on there as well. If you over contribute to your RRSP, so if you put more money than you're allowed to put in, they will penalize you. This needs to be figured out using a very complicated form, and the penalty is based on how much you over contributed and how long it was in the account for. So be careful there. When can I take out my RSP? So technically, you can take a draw from your RSP whenever you want, but as soon as you do, it becomes taxable income to you. So the amount of tax that you will pay depends on what your tax bracket is based on all of your taxable income for that year. So that would include not only your RSP withdrawal, but also your employment income and whatever other kind of income that you would have. The whole point of RSPs is that you're taking them out when you're at the lowest income level of your life. So retirement, right? So they're saying if you contribute while you're in a higher tax bracket, then you're saving the tax in a higher tax bracket and then taking it out later in a lower tax bracket, thereby you're saving money, okay? So that in that way, it is a really great program. But if you, we'll get into that part later, but just you have to be careful is even when you're taking it out, like let's say you do wait until you're retired and you take it out then, you still have to be careful because it's still taxable income. So a lot of people kind of get caught in this trap where they're like, oh yeah, I'm retired, it's all good, I'm not going to pay tax, but you do. So you have to be careful because especially if you're on a really tight budget because you're on CPP or something else like that, you just have to be careful there. There are also 2 other life events that may occur in which you can borrow your RSP funds, okay, and not have a tax penalty. So if you are a first-time home buyer, so meaning you haven't owned a house in the past 4 years, you are allowed to take up to $25,000 out of your RSP to make a down payment on the house. If you are purchasing with somebody else who is also a first-time home buyer, they could also take $25,000 out of their RSP. It is considered a loan, so you have to repay your RSP. They give you 15 years to do it. If during those 15 years you do not make your minimum repayment contribution, so they basically just take however much you took out and divide it by 15, and then each year you have to make that payment. If you do not, they add that amount to your taxable income for that year. So you get a little bit of a tax penalty, okay? You do not need to start making repayments until 2 years after your purchase. So technically you actually have 17 years to pay it off, but they don't count the first 2 years. Okay, the second life event that you are able to borrow from your RSP is if you or your spouse is enrolling in a full-time post-secondary program or part-time if you meet certain disability requirements, you can borrow the money from your RSP through what's called the lifelong learning program. You can take out up to $10,000 per year for a total of $20,000. Also, your spouse can take out that amount as well. So even if you're the only one going to school, they could take out 20 as well. You don't actually have to spend it on tuition or books. You can spend it on anything you want as long as you meet the criteria of being a full-time student, okay, in post-secondary, okay? Again, this program is a loan, so repayment is necessary to not be taxed on income. So they give you 10 years to pay it back, and the clock starts ticking when you haven't been in school for at least 3 months in a year for 2 years in a row, okay? If you end up being in school for longer than 5 years, for more than 3 months, they'll just make you start repaying it at that point. Okay, so if you have money in an RSP and you're considering taking a student loan, please consider this LLP program instead because it's a great interest-free way to fund your schooling with your own money. If you take any RSP funds out for any other reason than retirement or the 2 programs that we just talked about, and you're still working, presumably you're in a higher tax bracket, you will end up paying the same amount of tax that you do on all your other income, okay? So usually you wouldn't have saved any tax at all, or worse, if you put the RSP in when, let's say, you didn't make a whole bunch of money that year, but you still made an RSP contribution, and then the next year you took money out, but you had made more money that year, you're actually ending up paying more tax than you would have if you had just left that money out in the first place. So for that reason, I would never recommend using an RSP for any kind of savings vehicle unless it's specifically for retirement, down payment on your first house, or post-secondary education, okay? For yourself or your spouse only, not for your kids. Okay, the other issue when taking out RSP funds and having to report them as income is that it may affect any government benefits that you receive that are contingent on income. So for some examples of that would be OAS or Guaranteed Income Supplement, Alberta Senior Benefit, AISH or Alberta Works, Child Tax Benefit, GST credit, Alberta Carbon Levy. So all of those things, plus, or if you're like applying for a student loan or childcare subsidy or something like that, that RSP draw is going to be taken into consideration. So that is something that you need to think about. On the flip side of that, you can use RSP contributions to lower your taxable income for those same reasons. So like I said, it's RSP season right now. So if you got, let's say, a big bonus last year and you're like, man, that's going to kick me into a higher tax bracket, you could make a contribution to your RSP before March 1st of this year and benefit tax-wise, benefit-wise, all of that, right? So that's why it's a great program on that side of things. Now, the other caveat with RSPs is that the year that you turn 71, you must cash it out. So there are a few options on what cash out means. So the first option is literally cashing it. So taking all of the funds out of it at once. If you've been diligently saving for most of your working life, you should probably have quite a bit in there. And of course, cashing it all at once would lead to a high tax rate since your income would be all of the RSP fund plus whatever pension you have. So unless your RSP is quite small, I would not go that route. The second route, and definitely the most popular, is to convert your RSP into a different government controlled account called a Registered Retirement Income Fund, otherwise known as a RRIF. Basically, it's the exact same account as an RSP. You're just not allowed to contribute to it anymore, and they make you take a minimum amount every year. So it's based on your age and how much is in there. But they basically say, okay, every year you now have to take this amount. You can take more than that if you want, but there's a minimum in place, and that minimum amount that you take out is taxable income. You can have them tax it at source, which is nice, so you don't have to worry about that burden at tax time. The third option is that you could purchase an annuity. So it's kind of like an insurance plan that takes your RSP funds and then turns them into like predetermined payments to you every month until you die, basically. I don't know a whole lot about annuities. They're just not popular or something that I've dealt with a lot. So I do know somebody who works for Sun Life who has experience with annuities. So if that is something that you have questions on, just let me know and I can connect the two of you. Okay, so let's move on to TFSAs because RSPs, like I said, are great for saving for retirement, down payment on a house, and lifelong learning. But for everything else, there is TFSAs. So tax-free savings account, otherwise known as TFSAs, they're also registered programs, okay? So there are specific rules surrounding them. You can get one if you're a resident of Canada and you have a valid SIN and you're over 18 years old. They don't have quite the same tax deferral benefits as an RSP does, but they are far more flexible when it comes to cashing them out. So the benefit of it, like the name implies, is any money that you make within a tax-free savings account is tax-free. What the name does not imply is that it's not just a savings account. Like the RSP, you can have investments within it. So you can buy stocks, you can buy bonds, GICs, mutual funds, all that kind of stuff. Or you can just use it as a simple interest-bearing savings account. What you cannot do in a TFSA is day trade. So CRA doesn't really have a specific definition on day trading, but essentially if you're buying or selling stocks more than, say, bi-weekly, that I would say they would consider day trading, and they consider that to be business activity, and you're not allowed to do that within a TFSA, okay? How much can I contribute to a TFSA? So this one is not based on income. It is a flat amount no matter how much you made or didn't make. For 2019, it's $6,000, but that amount has changed several times since 2009 when the program started. So just like the RSP program, if you don't put the full $6,000 in this year, the unused contribution limit will carry forward. So for example, if you've never contributed to a TFSA, your contribution limit would be $63,500, which would include 2009 to now. If you don't know what your contribution limit is, you can check your online CRA account. Unlike RSPs, TFSAs follow the calendar year. There's no extra January, February contribution period there. If you over contribute to your TFSA, again, there is a penalty and a very complicated form that goes along with it. The penalty is based, again, on how much you over-contributed and how long that over-contribution stayed in the account. So the nice thing about TFSAs, so they don't, when you put money into a TFSA, it doesn't give you a tax deduction like an RRSP does, okay? So that means that you are paying income tax on whatever money you're putting in there. But when you go to take it out, there's no slip that comes either. So you don't pay tax when you take it out. So you can take money out of a TFSA anytime for any reason with no additional tax burden to be concerned about. So for this reason, I would always recommend a TFSA for anything short-term savings like vacations, weddings, anything other than retirement, okay? With both plans, you can name your spouse as a beneficiary. So that means that when you die, the money will roll over to their registered account and it won't become an immediate tax burden to them. However, with an RRSP, after your spouse dies, taxes will be due on any money left in the account. So if your children inherit the money, they will receive only what is left after taxes paid. But with a TFSA, it doesn't quite work that way. So what would happen is once your spouse dies, if anything is, okay, so whatever's left in the TFSA, if it is still making money, only the money that's being made on it after your spouse dies would become taxable income to the children in this example, okay? So that one, if you're doing estate planning, a TFSA is a safer option in terms of once both of you and your spouse have died, okay? So that's it for today. I hope that you learned something and have a good idea of where you want to direct your savings. And if you have any questions or if you should make, or if you want to know if you should make an RSP contribution before the March 1st deadline, please feel free to reach out to me sometime before, say, February 20th, and we can definitely chat about that. And other than that, I hope you guys all have a great week, and I will see you next time.